Mm-hmm. Oh, if you're watching online, YouTube, Facebook, all that good stuff, likes, love, shares, please subscribe. Hit that little subscribe button below. That'd be great. Oh, that sounds cleaner.
There we go. That's better.
Yeah. All right, here we go. Hey, good evening, everyone. This is Robert with the world-renowned Mr. Texas Real Estate, and this is the Texas Real Estate Radio Network. Hey, thanks for joining us. We've got a bunch of things to talk about, and most of it is going to be coping, how to cope with the craziness that's going on right now. And so, obviously, we would tell you to come to Complete Real Estate Investing. That is mrtxrei.com, so you can learn the fundamentals and understand the market trends. But we have a pretty big event coming up here August 4th. You can go to mrtxre.com. That's our website. Go to events, and we're doing a Red Talk. And I believe the title is How to Prosper Through Inflation and a Recession. And we're not making this stuff up because all of this that we're going through right now has happened before. Now, we as human beings like to think that we're unique and we're all special and, everything that we're doing is brand new to the universe when, of course, it's not. There is maybe a handful of original thought happening each day throughout the entire 6 to 8 billion people on the planet. But we've been brought up to believe we're special, and the social media tells us we're special, and people like and love and share and give us all this information so that we all feel super, super special, and everything that we're doing is unique, so we can't possibly learn anything from the past, which, of course, is all nonsense. So, my partner, very, very deep into trends, macro and micro trends for this market and the entire country, in real estate, in the economy, in cash. Really, he's looking at monetary supplies. That's one of the big things, and then everything drives from there. I look at it from more of a social and emotional intelligence perspective for me, and so I look back and say, okay, what does this look like? Do we have any idea what it kind of looks like? And we have really unique stuff going on in the economy right now. We have an impending, pending recession where unemployment is low, which is weird. It doesn't necessarily happen that way, right? We have supply chain issues still, which, first law of economics is you actually have to make something before you have something, right? Production is the first step in a sale of something, right? So we're having some supply issues. We have people going back to work. Employment's low. Wages have crept up a little bit, but we're still going through recession. So people are pulling back because there is inflation. Inflation is driving up the interest rates, and it drives up a lot of other things, a lot of fear. And so I'm looking and I'm like, okay, so let's go back. Let me go back a couple cycles. And for me, it's 73 to 78 is what I'm seeing. I'm seeing the end of the Nixon administration, Ford, and Carter. Now, we're in Texas, so of course it's all Carter's fault. Can't possibly be a Republican's fault. It's definitely Jimmy Carter's fault. But it's 73 through 78 is what I'm looking at. And I just started looking at, hey, all the social things. And this is probably a little controversial, so I'm going to say it in a very clinical, historical perspective. There's a lot of things going on with the mass shootings out there, and I'm sure this radio station talks about it a lot. And I don't have a good idea. I don't think anyone has a good solution towards it. Right? We can throw money at it, which is what kind of they're doing now. They can pull the restrictions back and make it harder. There's a balance, and maybe this will level out. But for those of you who didn't grow up in the 70s like I did, For those of you that are, I guess you'd be under the age of 50, you missed out on a lot of craziness that happened in the 70s. Between 73 and 78, you know what's happening? It's not mass shootings, it's bombings. It's bombings. If you go back and look at the historical data, there's about 50 bombings a year. Right? Like the, the Sudanese Liberation Army, SLA, all these little crazy groups that came out of that hippie culture, right, and just went radical, and they were bombing. Now, the difference between then and now is there wasn't national cable on news on 9 different stations. You had your local news, and then you had your half hour at night, right? You had Walter Concrete. Anyway, this is all happened before. So there's social unrest. There's all this craziness that no one can put a thought to. Like no rational person can sit there and try and understand what's happening. It's unrational. But back in the 70s, we had this craziness where these little groups going around and bombing things like post office and recruiting centers and universities and fire stations. And it was crazy. It got to such a point where people just stopped covering it in the news. And then it went away. And I don't know why it went away. Maybe it was better FBI work and better intelligence work and police officers in infiltrating or hey, in 83, starts that peak prosperity for us. Right? Second half of Reagan's first term, 82, 83, right? All the way through 2001. There's just great prosperity with a big dip during Bush Seniors. And we went into recession and there was problems. Basically, we put a lot of resources into the war and it didn't really have a good payback for us. And you can see the economic data. But 73 to 78 feels like if you can put yourself into that mindset, you kind of see a lot of similarities. Now, is it different? Yes. Is it everything is the same? No, it's not everything the same. But we can look back and we look at historical data so we can see what the people were thinking. And then there was a malaise, right? That was Reagan's big thing. It's like he took the people out of that malaise. But people started going into that malaise. So then I asked the question to my partner, hey, from 1973 to 1983, that decade right there, were people getting wealthy off of real estate? When we come back from break, we're going to talk about the answer to that. We want you to come on out to a big Red Talk event, real estate education talk, Red Talk. And it's here at our building, and it's on August 4th. It starts at 6 p.m. They may be, if we get enough sponsors, there'll probably be alcohol. If we don't really get any sponsors, there won't be. Well, there's leftover Bud Light still. We still have leftover Bud Light. So for sure you'll be able to find a Bud Light. But I think it's a 10 or 15 bucks. I don't even know what the price is. But sign up for it. Go to mrtxre.com. Go to the event page. You'll see it there. Red Talk, August 4th, Wednesday. Starts at 6 p.m. We'll see you guys there. All right. Hey, hang tight. We'll be back from the break here. Hey, welcome back, everyone. This is Robert with the world-renowned Mr. Texas Real Estate. This is the Texas Real Estate Radio Network. All of this has happened before, and all of this will happen again. That's my Battlestar Galactica little mantra there for all you nerds. Here's the deal. So we're comparing, like, what economic period can we compare ourselves to so that we can look for economic indicators? Will it be exactly the same? No, it will not be exactly the same. But there could be indicators that we're looking at and we should keep an eye out for if things are happening in our economy that will say, hey, A, B, and C has happened, then therefore we can kind of bet, educated guess, hypothesize that D is going to happen. So we want to put it into perspective, and then we want to do the analyticals into it, and then we want to say, okay, I think we should do this. And I'll give you one of those in the next segment here. But again, we're comparing it to like 73 to 78, maybe 73 to 83, what's happening. Our numbers, we still feel good about, but hey, things have happily changed, right? Russia invaded Ukraine, which put a spike in the oil market, which is great for Houston. There are lots of turnarounds happening right now. There's lots of money being pumped. There are third shifts happening right now, right? Also, there is low unemployment. However, our economy is not growing and interest rates are going up. So we got sort of a stagnation thing going on here. But for Houston, it's good. For the Rust Belt, not so good. Right? All you guys that went up in Indiana, invested in Indiana and Dayton, Ohio, and Memphis, you might be having some problems in the next decade. Here in Texas, Houston, Beaumont, Corpus Christi, solid. Solid. How do we know? Well, we can go and look. We can see. Now, 5 years from now, 8 years from now, will there be a turnaround maybe in our area? Yes. But right now, we can look at some of the indicators and say, hey, what happened in Houston in the 70s? Where did the real estate market go from 73 to 78? Before we hit that, that 81 big-time oil recession that hit this marketplace. So what are we looking at? What can we do in the next 5 years? And again, we're comparing it to 73 to 78, 73 to 83, because there's crazy stuff going on. There's irrational stuff happening in our media every single day. Things we just can't put a finger to. There is a culture shift, right, that came out of the hippie stuff in Woodstock that was still happening in the early 70s. There's a big culture shift that's going on now with us. It's in people's declaration of their sexuality. And it doesn't bother me at all. I know it bothers other people because they don't have anything better to worry about. But, hey, it doesn't bother me. And it wouldn't bother me. And here's the thing. Let's understand this straight up. Okay? So if you were born in the 80s or late 70s, have an honest conversation with your parents about the key parties they went to. Take a look at some of the novels being written in the late 60s and the 70s about that suburban culture. Have fun with that. So there is craziness that happens every decade and every generation. It just happens, right? Unfortunately, we think that we're special. So this must be unique. Oh my God, it was never like this before. Well, it was exactly like this before, just not exactly like this before. If that makes sense. And so if we know that things are happening, if we can look at the social economics, and we can look at the sort of emotional intelligence in the workplace, right? I mean, early 70s, listen to John Lennon's Working Class Hero. Pull that song up. He's talking about you today, who can't pull yourself away from the TV, watching nonsense on news. 50 years ago, he's writing about you. Nothing has changed. So if our hypothesis is correct, then let's look at that market that we think we tie to the closest, 73 to 78, and figure out, hey, what's going on in real estate? What's going on in the stock market? What's going on in wealth in general? There were people absolutely getting rich in the 70s. So how do we do that? How do we create some, I hate using the word, but how do we create some financial security by hedging against what has already happened? Now, it just so happens I have a really smart partner who loves the micro and the macro trends of economic and currency manipulation and the workplace and jobs and real estate, and we can kind of start looking at some of these trends. And we're going to talk a lot about that on August 4th. It's a Wednesday night. Make sure you come out. It's a Red Talk. Go to MRTXRE.com. Go to the event page, look it up. But there are things that are out there. Now, I'm going to tell you something kind of funny. We're having a hard time finding a real estate broker that was also in business in the 70s. We're kind of struggling a little bit. They would have to have been like in their early 20s in real estate to have and then we have to hope that they can remember, can connect some events that are happening, right? So we're having a hard time finding someone like that. But if you know someone, let us know. We'd love to get them on a panel and just kind of pick their brain. We've gone out to the local universities and asked some economic professors if they'd like to sit in on the panel. Because there are trends, right? And again, how 90% of the population likes to think that they're unique and special, and this is all new, and 10% of the population can manipulate the fact that there are trends, there are technical data that shows how things will respond, and those are the people that become filthy rich. Now, we may not be 100% correct, but at least we're thinking this way, right? Critical thought. It is absolutely, again, I will say, critical thought. My God, our population is losing critical thought. We're getting numb to all this stuff. We're not being able to think for ourselves, which of course was what they said in the 50s and 60s with rock and roll. Kids aren't thinking for themselves. They're mindless. They're just going to walk around. They're all going to be these hippies. And back then, they weren't even hippies, right? They were beatniks going up to New York City, hanging out, smoking hashish. Anyway, all these trends happen again, right? So you have to have some critical thought. You have to be open for it. You have to have just observe it and think critically. Hey, okay, so what happens? When we come back from the break, I'm going to tell you some of the things that real estate boomed in the 70s and what it looked like. And it's what we're looking for. And this great phone call we got this week. Hey, this is Robert with the world-renowned Mr. Texas Real Estate. This is the Texas Real Estate Radio Network. Hang tight, guy. We'll be back. Hey, welcome back, everyone. This is Robert with the world-renowned Mr. Texas Real Estate, the Texas Real Estate Radio Network. Check us out on our podcast. We're on Spotify. We're everywhere. You can go download the podcast. You can catch us. If you are listening to podcasts, then I'm in your ear right now. I'm standing behind you in the shadows. Okay, it's really creepy to think that people are listening to me in their ear when they're jogging or doing housework. It's really crazy. Wherever they are, yeah. The phone call is coming from inside the house. It's me. Anyway, all right, so listen. August 4th, it's a Wednesday. It's going to be hot. It's going to be a hot day, of course. Whew, it's really, really hot. We're looking at micro and macro trends, and we're looking for economies that matched up to what's happening now, and we're going to try and identify some indicators in that market back then and what we should be looking for now. Okay, so for all you Trump fans out there, one of the things to understand is that Donald Trump Jr.'s father made a ton of money in New York City in a place called Co-op City, just north of New York City. It's on the way up by the GW Bridge. It was subsidized housing, low-income housing, government housing, whatever. And I think, because we already know there's not enough houses, right? So one of the indicators, and again, Jason will talk to you all day long about the fact that there's not enough housing starts, and Gary Keller said we're 17 years behind, and we can see that there's sticks going up, but it just won't be enough. There's mass immigration here and from state to state. People are landing in Houston, they're landing in Dallas, and landing in Phoenix. There has to be a boom. There's restrictions on how we can develop now, so there's a bottleneck, which was the same thing in the early 70s. And it was the same exact problem. There wasn't enough low-income housing. You can go anywhere in any major city and look at the projects, right? And you're going to see that those were built in the 60s and early 70s. And at some point, they got smart and they said, we're not going to build them ourselves. We're going to allow entrepreneurs to come in and build them. So one of the things, this is not all of the things, but we'll give it to you tonight on the radio. One of the things we're looking for is an uptick in government and non-government partnerships, right? For housing. Now it's been sprinkled out there. There's always enough money in the HUD budget that produces a housing authority, and there's someone in that housing authority that's job is it to try and get investors to move the marketplace and invest in low-income housing. There's someone in every major and secondary, even the tertiary markets, right? Like Corpus and Tyler, El Paso and Beaumont. There's somebody in an office somewhere whose job it is to figure out how to get more housing stock into the marketplace. And for the last 20 years, I would say they have not had very many tools in their toolbox, not enough arrows in their quivers. So if we see a little trend that they start getting more arrows, and it would start to look something like this. Hey, do you know there's a free window program? The city of, and this I'm making it up, of whatever, East Paris, Albuquerque, Texas, is going to give you free windows if you have your housing for Section 8. Or they may say if 50% of your housing stock is Section 8, we'll go ahead and do all the apartment windows. Now, they won't do it. They'll give it to you in the form of a rebate check, or they'll give it to you in the form of a tax credit. But these are the things we need to kind of keep our antennas up for. Because that means that, hey, it's somewhere at the government level, there is money being pushed into the marketplace to create more housing. And it's going to be low-income housing, right? Because we know there's just not enough low-income housing. Hey, you can go out there and you can buy a house for $400,000 today. You don't got to worry about that stock. 400, 500, 600 million. It may not be all the choices you had 3 years ago, but you can go. You're moving from Minnesota to Texas because you work for 3M. You're making, $250,000 a year. You are not going to have a problem finding a house. You will find a house that is absolutely perfect for you. Now, if you're the truck driver for 3M and you're making $85,000 a year, and your wife works at Walmart, and she makes $30,000 a year, you might find a hard time finding something for $300,000 below the median. You might have to step up and push your mortgage payment up. Now, if you're the guy who works for the trucking company, who sweeps out the trailers and cleans up around the place and only makes $15 an hour, you're going to have a really hard time in the next decade finding a house, finding a place to live. And so we're looking for, hey, are there indicators inside the government machine that's going to push more tools for the housing authorities? Because that was a big thing in the 60s and 70s. Like, there's mass development in the major cities, and a lot of these projects came out of it. We say that with a negative connotation right now, but it was a project. It was, hey, it was better than living on the street, right? Or it's better living in a slumlord with 3 families in a 5-story walk-up. That's my Brooklyn right there, right? Jersey City, Newark, right? All of a sudden you get better housing. So those are one of the couple things that we're looking for. And we'll talk more about the other indicators that we're looking at, but that's one of them. And we had a really interesting conversation we've had it over time. We've had a mayor's office, a housing authority office, and then we have a economic developer for the city calling us. We won't tell you what cities or where they are. Those are still in negotiations, but we've been approached. And just last week we were approached and said, hey, we want to give you money if you could do certain things and help us with our goals. So that lack of low-income housing is already having an impact on the cities. They're seeing it, right? We're seeing it. There's not a lot of families that are out there on the street, but the zombies are out there, right? The folks that choose to do drugs and have all kinds of problems. And they're always going to be there, right? It's when we start seeing the families on the street, that's when we start getting very nervous. When families start living out of cars like we did for a very brief time back in 2010, makes it nervous. The cities get nervous, right? So we got to get more housing stock. So that's one of the indicators that we're going to be looking at. We'll talk more about this on August 4th at the Red Talk, how to prosper during inflation and a recession. Go to mrtxre.com, go to our event page. I don't know. I feel like it's $10, but maybe it should be like $25 because this is really important for folks who plan on doing some real estate investing in the next decade. I might just up the price. Yeah, we'll see. All right, guys, hang tight. We'll be back. Hey, welcome back, everyone. This is Robert with the world-renowned Mr. Texas Real Estate. This is the Texas Real Estate Radio Network. We're talking about everything has happened before and will happen again. So we have an event on August 4th, the Red Talk. It's a really good event. It's called How to Succeed Through a Recession and High Inflation. And my partner's joining us right now. And how do we know that we can sit in a room on August 4th in a hot summer night and the air conditioning won't be enough to keep up and we'll all be sweating, drinking beer that's over a year old? How do we know?
This sounds like a really great event. I want to go. I want to sign up right now.
Because this has all happened before.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. And there's two of us, Jason and myself, who seem to be the only guys in this market who aren't running around with chickens like their head chopped off. We're just looking at economic data saying, oh, look what happened in 73 to 78.
Yeah.
Let's just do what they did to get really wealthy.
Yeah, this is not, it's so funny. It is, in the history of never have rising rates destroyed house prices. It's fascinating to me. Even economists get this wrong. I'm like, dude, you got a PhD. You might want to trade that in for something else. I mean, it's been amazing to watch. It's like, let's look at the period of the highest inflation in the 70s and 80s. House prices still went through the roof. So I don't get it.
No, it is a classic correlation does not equal causation, right?
Right. Yeah. And it's I was chatting with a guy yesterday, really nice guy. He's going to join us for our Zoom calls on Mondays and Fridays.
Oh, great.
And so he said, "Hey Jason, what he posted and said Houston has a 48% decline in sales." And I said, "Where are you getting that data? Because I don't see it." He goes, "Zillow." I'm like, "The data's wrong." He said, "Well, it's what they." So I went last night while I was on the phone, pulled up the hard data. It's not 98%. It's like 0.25%.
Yeah.
Month over month.
Yeah.
Because he said, "Well, you understand," because I posted the hard data, and he goes, "Well, that was for May, but now June numbers are even worse." And I'm like, "No." So I went right to hard, and I pulled him. He goes, "Are you telling me the Zillow numbers are as wrong as their estimates?" And I was like, "Yes." He was joking, right?
Yeah, right,
he sent me he sent me a DM, and he goes, "I guess they're as bad as their estimates." I'm like, "Dude, do not believe some of this data you guys are seeing." So I said, and then the next question I asked was, "Yeah, there's been a little decline in sales." Remember, that's the number of sales, not the prices.
No, prices have still gone up, and the actual dollar value has gone up.
Yeah, the volume and everything is up.
We're doing less sales and more dollars.
That's right.
Yeah.
So I said, "Well, what's the cause of the decline in sales? Is it from the lack of inventory or is it from the lack of demand?" And he was like, "It's probably a lack of inventory." I said, "Exactly." So the problem is that to me, when I look at this problem, it's very simple. But for people who don't deal kind of in the world of economics, it is kind of difficult. It's like, wait a minute, sales are going down. Why are sales going down? Well, nobody must be buying. No, there's no stuff to buy.
Right.
I have to wait 2 years to buy a Porsche that used to take 4 months 2 years ago. Is it because nobody wants to buy Porsches anymore? No, because they can't make enough of the stupid things, right?
And we tell the story of one of our mastermind members who 2.5 years ago heard us on the radio, 3 years ago heard us on the radio and said, "Buy everything you can buy under $100,000 right now."
Yes.
And he went out and bought like 40 properties.
Yeah.
Said, I took your advice. It's amazing, right?
Yeah, he's like, great.
Well, we're telling people now, everything under 150, buy it.
Yes.
I don't care what it looks like.
Is there anything in
buy it.
Corpus left under 150?
Barely.
Remember, we used to go in there and buy everything for like 70, 80 G's. And then one day I'm sitting there.
30,000 a door on multifamily.
Yeah, and then one day I pull up and I'm like, wait a minute, there's not even like crack houses for under 150 right now. So it's, and I'll give you guys another example. So our little beach house, the one I bought last year that I thought I was crazy paying $380,000 for a 600 square foot house, built in 1960, 380 grand. We contracted and we're about to close on the one next door. The appraisal came back. Remember, the one I bought was a 2.2. This one I'm buying is a 2.1. It appraised 6 months later at 500.
Yeah.
Made 120 grand in like 5 months.
25%.
In 5 months,
5
right?
months, yep.
So you start looking at it and they're like, there's no way. It's not. And I'm like, you tell me the mechanism for a real estate crash, because I ain't seeing it.
Yeah.
I just don't. And I keep telling everybody, buy Aaron Clary's book, The Insider's Guide to the Housing Crash, or whatever it's called.
Yep.
It's a phenomenal book, because when you read the book, you realize so much had to happen in order for 08 and 09 to occur.
Well, like we like to say around here, if you're looking for an excuse not to invest, they're everywhere.
Oh, man, I got a good quote for you. I had all these great quotes. I was out hiking for 2 weeks. We haven't gotten to all that yet. Cowardice is an easy solution. Yeah. Do nothing because there's too much risk. Being a coward's easy. That's what when you really get down to market's going to crash, market's going to crash, market's going to crash. All you're doing is justifying your cowardice for the last 3 years.
Absolutely.
That's all it is. It's okay to be a coward. Everybody's a coward. Everybody is.
It's scary, yeah. I just finished, I re-listened to 10X.
Oh, yeah?
And Grant Cardone. And in that book, he talks about every time he sits down to try and do a big deal, he's nervous as all heck.
Yeah.
He's totally freaking out, and he doesn't want to do it. And he tries to comes up with excuses in his own mind, and but he has a way to muscle through it.
Yeah.
Most people don't, and that's the difference.
It was funny. I was chatting with a buddy of mine who's a fighter, and we're training and all that. In fact, I get started again today, which is going to be just brutal. And we were talking about competing and fighting and all that other stuff. And I can remember every fight I got into, scheduled fight. We're going to this tournament. We're gonna go fight. I don't care if you are the reigning world champion. You're walking up and you're like, 2 dudes are entering here, and one is gonna win.
Yeah.
And you got to stare that guy down. And really, you fighting yourself is more scary than fighting somebody else, because you're just scared, and it's all the nerves. And when I was racing, it was the same way. It's like, here we go. We're coming up to the starting block. Like, who's going to win and who's not? Because there's only one guy that holds that trophy.
It's the same thing for you, right? Who am I talking to? I'm talking to you right now, the guy in the cubicle at Exxon, BP, wherever, secondary group, engineering group out there who does the rigs. I'm talking to someone in the medical center. I'm talking to someone who's a professional who's like, oh my God, in the tech world right here in Houston. And yeah, you should be afraid to go and invest in real estate. It's natural. But getting around us and our group takes the edge off a little bit. You still got to go in and fight.
You still got to go in and
fight. You
fight.
still got to go in and do the deal. Right?
But it's like what David Goggins says. You want to be uncommon amongst uncommon people.
That's right.
So when you get around guys that are fighting all the time, when you get around guys and gals that are buying, investing all the time, it's like, oh yeah, I bought 3 this week. And you're like, I'm just trying to buy 1 this quarter. Like, what do you mean you bought 3 this week? Yeah, man, just go buy a house. What's the big deal?
Right.
Like, it's normal.
Yeah.
When we first moved into our neighborhood in Sugar Land, what I thought was so funny is in that particular area, excellence is just kind of part of life.
Yeah.
We had 4 Eagle Scouts on our street.
Right.
So when my son started getting into Scouts, it's like, well, I guess I'm just going to be an Eagle Scout. And I'm like, you got a long way, buddy. But it's like, well, if this is normal,
that dude could do it.
If that guy can do it,
right, I could do it.
Yeah, like this isn't that hard.
Why can't I do it?
Yeah, why not?
You can. Yeah,
you can, man. Because
right.
And then you realize there's all this institutional knowledge. All right, man, let me show you how to do this faster. Let me show you how to do this easier or better or whatever. And it's like, oh, okay, well now this makes sense.
Yeah, they come to our office and they're like, I'm nervous. We're like, yeah, you should be, but that's okay. It's like, well, does this really work? I have no idea. On your deal, on the 150 we've done in the last 2 years, yeah, they've worked.
Yeah.
But you might be the 151st. It may not work. I'm not
Yeah,
going to guarantee it for you.
May not work, man.
Yeah, but let's go do it anyway and find out.
Yeah, what's the worst thing that will happen is you look back 5 years from now, because a lot of you have been in, quote, real estate for the last 5 years, but really not doing much. And you go, damn, I should have bought a lot more of this stuff 5 years ago. Should have bought so much more 5 years ago.
Hey, guys, thanks for joining us. This is Robert and Jason with the world-renowned Mr. Texas Real Estate. Stay tuned. We'll be back for a short break. See you tomorrow night.